In this video, I'll be assuming two things. One, that Monster Hunter World was your first Monster Hunter, or you're just not completely familiar with everything that Generations and now Generations Ultimate will offer. And two, that you're probably well versed in the weapon that I'll be discussing, so this won't be a full-on guide, but rather a quick summary on the differences between the weapons in the two games.
What's the difference?
Hey guys, what's up? Right now, I'm going to be talking about the Charge Blade. I feel like this is going to be one of the most important videos in this little series because Charge Blade, unlike many of the other weapons, is not a culmination or a refined version of the weapon before, but rather a return to form of how it played in 4 Ultimate. I'm going to be straight up with you guys, and I think that this is going to be one of the most uncomfortable weapons to switch between if you're going from World and Gen Ultimate and back. To understand why, let's look at some of the new and returning aspects of Charge Blade. And you're going to see quickly why some of these are so impactful and people were happy to see them return. First, they reverted how guard points work. We regained the ability to guard point into a super or into an ultra, which is very key to how we play the weapon. The other is that we gained the ability to super or ultra from sword and shield mode. Both of these things were not completely new, but rather something that was in 4 Ultimate that they brought back. Those are only 2 things, but they really increased the comfort and effectiveness of Charge Blade, as you guys probably know. A couple of the new things were the ability to charge our sword, giving our sword attacks the same effects as file attacks. Coupled with that is the fact that we have permanent red shield, and by permanent I mean we won't lose the red shield when we use an ultra. This mechanic, along with the fact that the ultra has been buffed, plays a huge part in the way we play Charge Blade in Monster Hunter World. And they're the main reasons why Ultra Spam is the most effective way to play Charge Blade right now. Other than that, there are a couple of general changes that were made that really helps Charge Blade, like the ability to roll out of most attacks, the sliding is great, it lets us reposition, and Charge Blade in essence has always been a weapon all about positioning and timing, so the ability to maneuver a lot easier and slide also helps the weapon. Thanks to all of these aspects, Charge Blade in World is probably the strongest iteration of Charge Blade we've ever had. I was gonna say best, but if you ask me and a lot of other Charge Blade mains, the Ultra Spam just isn't really truly what the Charge Blade was always about, and I'll talk about more of that later. But nonetheless, we can't deny that Charge Blade is one of the, if not the strongest, Blade Master weapon in the game. Now you guys might be worried because you're probably thinking, well wait a second, all of these great things that we have in World are not in Gen Ultimate? Well, yeah, pretty much. You see, Generations had probably the weakest iteration of Charge Blade. And it wasn't just damage nerfs that hurt it, but just also how it played. Here are some very important things that you guys need to remember. First off, you won't be able to charge into Red Shield from Sword and Shield mode. No matter how many files you have, if you try to load your shield from Sword and Shield mode, you'll only get a yellow shield. You have to load your shield from Axe mode to get a red shield. Also, across all styles of the weapon, we lose the ability to Ultra or Super from Sword and Shield mode. If you try to do it, depending on the style, you'll either just load your shield, or nothing will happen. Because of this, the Charge Blade lost one of its easiest ways to put out damage the fastest. You also won't be able to Super or Ultra right after a guard point, as the guard points function differently in this game. Instead of cutting the animation short and letting you go right into a Super or Ultra, you have to finish the full axe swing, and then you can do your next attack. This change is probably one of the most clunkiest things they did. I'm not really sure why they did it, so it'll take a bit of getting used to. Also, as I mentioned before, the Ultra is incredibly weak in this game. It had its motion values nerfed, and since we lose our red shield, there's really no situation where you'd want to be doing it except for Brave style, which I'll talk about soon. But yeah, you really don't want to Ultra in this game. The playstyle in this game will revolve a lot more around the supers and your smaller file attacks. This is something I kind of like about Charge Blade, as relying on supers and the other file attacks is kind of how it played in 4 Ultimate. Despite all these clunky changes and perhaps having the weirdest iteration of Charge Blade yet, it's still the Charge Blade, guys. It might not be as strong as it is in World, but it's still strong and a very fun and satisfying weapon to play, especially depending on the style you're playing. Speaking of which, let's talk about that next. First off is Guild. The only difference between Guild and Striker in this case is that Guild can do the shield thrust, but since we can't super out of the sword shield thrust combo, having the shield thrust really doesn't matter, so you're going to see a lot of people opting for Striker over Guild. Speaking of Striker, It's pretty much the same thing except without the shield thrust, and we get a little guard point and our little sword attack advance, which can be pretty useful. The Charge Blade has pretty interesting arts, but just having the 3 for the absolute hunter arts and one of your choice is usually what people go for. The extra damage on the axe attacks also gives the style a couple of extra points. Next is Aerial. Aerial is incredibly fun, and it's even better in Gen Ultimate than it was in Generations. They made it so that it can keep its red shield while you're fighting. Before, if you loaded up into red shield, it would force you to ultra in the air. But now you can have red shield and super in the air, which will let you do a bit more damage. You also don't lose anything you'd like to have in aerial style, which is good. Next up is Adept. Adept is another really cool style for Charge Blade. While in Sword and Shield mode, we gain the perfect block, while in Axe mode, we get the perfect evade. If you do a successful counter with your shield, you can really quickly do your double slash to gain some files, or if you already have files, you can very quickly load them up. And again, Adept doesn't lose anything important. Brave style is really interesting. It gives a Charge Blade a lot of mobility and a guard point every time you dodge. One of the coolest things it can do is that if you're doing your Axe mode attacks, you can just infinitely file, just over and over again, at least until your files run out. Since you gain the blue shield once you reach Brave mode, you can actually ultra and not lose your shield. That being said, the ultra is still really weak, so you probably don't want to do this. However, given the nature of how Brave Charge Blade works, Brave might actually be really good for an elemental approach, as an ultra is a little bit more justifiable in that case. There's not much to say about Alchemy.
Do a barrel roll!
Once again, it's pretty much a supportive striker style, so you'll see it be used here and there. Lastly, I'll talk about the hunter arts. For the most parts, most of Charge Blade's arts were pretty mediocre, at least until Gen Ultimate. The only reason Striker was used was not really for the arts, but again just for the stronger axe attacks and being able to take both absolute evade and absolute readiness to help with the positioning problem. It had healing file, which changed your files into healing files, which allowed you to heal yourself and your teammates, but, you know, it's kind of dumb. The other was Limit Breaker. It allowed you to increase your max files, and you could do some pretty interesting stuff with this. I saw some people do some cool stuff with elemental files and just putting out huge ultras of like water or fire damage. It can increase the damage of your ultra and Energy Blade, which is the next hunter I'll talk about, but again, on its own it's just not that great. Then there's Energy Blade, which is not bad. It does a decent amount of damage, but it consumes all your files, and just with the situation that Charge Blade is already in, you probably won't be using this. But the new art that Charge Blade got in Gen Ultimate, I feel like they gave it this art because all the others weren't that great, is the Chainsaw. This art is great. It does a lot of damage, it'll net you a lot of files very quickly, and it can combo right into an Axe mode attack, so you can just keep on fighting once you got what you need. Definitely the best hunter art for Charge Blade, and one of the better hunter arts in the game in my opinion, just because of how it works. When it comes down to what style you'll use, you'll most likely use Striker if you're trying to put out the most damage. Although Adept and Brave are still very strong and can net you some good solo times. Also, it's a little bit situational, but depending on the matchup, Aerial Charge Blade can also be really viable too. And it's really fun. In summary, if Charge Blade was your main in World, it's going to take a bit of getting used to in Gen Ultimate. Not to be crude, but we'll see if it's still your main once you try it here. You're going to have to work a little harder to get the same results that Charge Blade got in World here in Gen Ultimate. That being said, it's still a fun weapon and the principle is the same. It's a very good offensive and defensive weapon. It's still really good at getting KOs, which will help if you're playing solo or with a team. Again, you do not want to ultra spam. You really just don't want to ultra at all in Gen U. Unless maybe you're using Brave and it's an elemental set. Gen U Charge Blade is a lot less forgiving than it is in World, but it's still a fun weapon. You want to just experiment with all the styles and see which one fits you best and which one will kind of help remind you the most of World pretty much. I hope this helped you see the difference between your weapon in the two games and kind of give you an idea of what to expect and what not to expect when you give it a try here in Gen U. Thank you guys for watching and happy hunting.